the effect of this restraining order on the narcissist. In some instances, the actions of our kind necessitate the obtaining of an injunction or a restraining order to address certain behaviours of the narcissist. Obtaining one is not always as straightforward as it might appear, though, of course, much depends on the school of narcissist that you're dealing with. In certain instances, you can often count on facing a counter-application from the narcissist, which is designed to muddy the waters, intimidate you, and or be used as a bargaining chip in order to cause you to drop your own action. Remember, the lesser or mid-range narcissist behaves with the sense of entitlement, lack of emotional empathy, and lack of awareness, and invariably will create evidence that is supportive of your application. With regard to any counter-application that they may make, expect the fabrication of evidence. Where you're dealing with a greater or ultra, you will face a much more difficult situation. The fabrication of the evidence will be of a higher quality, and it will be a lot harder to pin a restraining order on a greater or ultra to begin with because of the lack of evidence and a concerted attempt to reject this assertion of control. Let us assume, however, that you have overcome the evidential and legal hurdles and you've obtained one. This video isn't about how you go about getting one of those restraining orders or injunctions, the evidential burdens, the way that the narcissist responds to the actual application itself. But this is about telling you that how the narcissist will respond when you've actually secured one and there hasn't been any cross-application from the narcissist. In the instance where you successfully obtain an injunction or a restraining order, will the narcissist obey it? And will there be any other consequences? Don't think that it is a simple matter of the narcissist evaluating whether it should be obeyed or not. You have to keep in mind that the narcissist operates from a position of a sense of entitlement, a lack of accountability, a lack of emotional empathy, grandiosity, haughtiness, and of course the pursuit of the prime aims. And this, whether unconscious in the case of lesser or mid-range narcissist, or conscious where greater or ultra, has an impact upon the way that the narcissist responds where a restraining order has been obtained. The starting point is that the presence of a restraining order is regarded as a terrible and unjustified imposition on the narcissist's capacity to do what must be done. With the lesser and mid-range narcissist, of course, they see it as just a restraint on their freedom generally, and they don't realise, because of their unconscious need for the prime aims, that it is an attempt to shackle their ability to assert control, gain fuel, and obtain residual benefits. And therefore, they will see it more in the context of the overall curtailing of their freedom. The greater or ultra, of course, recognises, in the rare event that one is obtained against them, that it restrains the narcissist in some way from looking to obtain those prime aims. But what about the response? How does it fit into the narcissistic dynamic? This, of course, differs depending on the type of narcissist that your order is against. Let's start with the lesser narcissist. The lesser narcissist has a lower control threshold on the ignited fury. That means that the lesser narcissist's fury is more prone to erupt, and when it does, it's more likely to emerge as heated fury, particularly when dealing with lower lesser or upper lesser type B. Middle lesser is a mix of some cold fury, but again, significant heated fury. The lesser, however, operates from a position of less energy, especially lower lesser and middle lesser, and that decreases motivation to embark on a hoover. In the circumstances, whoever it is who has to serve the restraining order, it is that individual who is likely to receive the initial backlash as a lesser's fury erupts on the process server, the inquiry agent, the private detective, the court official, whoever it is that does the service. The provision of such a shackle on the lesser narcissist affects control and, dependent on the method of delivery, either wounds or amounts to challenge fuel. Most process servers will just serve the order without providing fuel. The same goes for a judge if the narcissist has attended court to challenge the application. And you can, in the circumstances, if the narcissist attended court to challenge the application, there might be an eruption of fury towards the judge. You can expect an immediate eruption in such circumstances, and the lesser narcissist will lash out with heated fury, possibly physical violence, certainly verbal tirade against those in the vicinity. Once this heated fury has abated through the provision of fuel, as the narcissist seeks to assert control over those relevant individuals, or where control could not be asserted directly, the narcissist has done so indirectly or through withdrawal, will the narcissist who is a lesser obey the court order? The existence of the order makes it less likely that the narcissist will hoover. So when there is a hoover trigger as a consequence of something else happening, or you just enter the sixth sphere of influence, then the narcissist unconsciously is less likely to hoover because of that one factor. It's the existence of the order means that the criteria are less likely to be met, meaning that there is a reduced risk of you being hoovered. Note that it's not actually the order per se that causes compliance, but its effect on the unconscious hoover execution criteria. That's why it's necessary to understand how the restraining order fits in. When it's granted, when it's served, that acts to provide challenge fuel or wounding to the lesser narcissist. And in that instant, they will erupt and seek to assert control over the person serving or making the order. When that control has been asserted in one of the different ways of the three assertions of control, the matter halts for the moment. Then, when a hoover trigger occurs, and invariably it will, that raises the possibility that you will be hoovered by this lesser narcissist. At that stage, the existence of the restraining order serves as a depressant factor within the hoover execution criteria, thereby reducing the possibility of you being hoovered. However, if the narcissist, for instance, is struggling for fuel, if the narcissist needs money from you, for example, or wishes to see children, if the narcissist has other factors in the hoover execution criteria which will outweigh the depressant effect of the existence of the order, you will still be hoovered. And the lesser narcissists, particularly lower lesser and middle lesser, being of a lower cognitive function, are more likely just to ignore the provisions and seek to contact you in some way. Indeed, in some instances, the fact that they see this order acts to repeatedly trigger the lesser narcissist, and then may well, dependent upon the factors in the hoover execution criteria, cause them to come and confront you, asking, what the hell have you done? Why the fuck have you gone and got a restraining order against me? Who do you think you are? Of course, they immediately breach it. You can call the police and have them arrested and taken away. You also need to be cautious, for instance, if the lesser happens to see you somewhere, perhaps accidentally. You come on the radar, there's hoover trigger, and notwithstanding the existence of the order, the Hoover execution criteria can be met. The order does diminish it slightly with a lesser narcissist, but not by much. And on balance, lesser narcissists are more likely to breach restraining orders. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't get one, and nor should you listen where people suggest actually it's pointless getting a restraining order because it'll provoke the narcissist. Yes, it will provoke the narcissist, but the narcissist is going to be provoked by other things anyway. So you need to evaluate it in this way. If you've broken up with the narcissist, that you're frightened of the narcissist, you're trying to get away from the narcissist, and you don't get a restraining order, all that's going to happen is they will keep being physically violent, verbally violent, sexually violent towards you, destroying property, etc., because you're dealing with a lesser narcissist, where lower lesser, middle lesser, and possibly upper lesser type B. Upper lesser type A are less likely to damage property. They're less likely to be physically violent, but they can be. And so if you haven't got a restraining order, all that will happen is you continue to be abused in that manner, because you will provoke the narcissist in some way, unintentionally, by threatening, control or wounding. However, if you have obtained a restraining order, it will act to reduce the likelihood of Hoover, but only slightly. And of course, if there are other factors which outweigh it, yes, the narcissist will still attempt to Hoover you. And of course, the existence of the order in itself acts as a Hoover trigger. And if there aren't other factors which reduce the risk of a Hoover, and there are other factors which increase the risk of a Hoover, notwithstanding the slight depressant effect of the existence of the order, you will still be hoovered by the narcissist, and through heated fury because you're dealing with a lesser. However, you have a restraining order and it's just been breached, and invariably the lesser, being of lower cognitive function, will do something stupid, allowing you to provide evidence of what the lesser has done, and then they're arrested and they are in breach and they will be committed to prison. So in the case of the lesser, there are two instances. They will erupt at the person serving them, they'll erupt at the judge that makes the order, and then the matter abates. And then at a later juncture, because there will be a Hoover trigger, they may be slightly less likely prone to Hoover you because of the existence of the restraining order, but it very much depends upon the relevant Hoover execution criteria. And the key to it is to make your no-contact regime as solid as possible using the techniques that I've told you about in other videos. Combine that with the restraining order, then the chances of the narcissist successfully hoovering you will be reduced. In instances where perhaps your total no-contact regime isn't as good as it ought to be, combined with the fact that there may be instances whereby there are other criteria that you don't know about, things going on in the narcissist fuel matrix, for instance, which compel him to hoover you, the existence of the restraining order will prove to be a provocation, but it is one that ultimately plays in your favour because he'll breach it and be sent to prison. What about the mid-range narcissist? The mid-range narcissist is actually, of all the schools of narcissists, most likely to obey the order. This is because his passive-aggressive nature doesn't lend itself to contravening the order, combined with the fact that the existence of the order reduces the risk of hoovering to begin with. Furthermore, because of the increased cognitive function of mid-range narcissists, they are well aware of the downside of contravening the order and the consequent effect on his liberty, which will then, of course, have two significant downsides which the narcissism caters for. One, the reduction in his ability to hamper his fuel-gathering capabilities. Two, impact upon the facade. And it is actually more usually the existence of the facade which causes the mid-ranger not to breach. Because when there is a Hoover trigger and the narcissism says, you need to assert control, in the unconscious mind, remember, of the narcissist, you need to assert control over this appliance, the facade light is flashing. And the facade light not only flashes a lot of the time to prevent the narcissist behaving in a particular way, but will flash with added intensity where there is a restraining order. And in all likelihood, mid-rangers will obey the restraining order. Of course, it may be more difficult to get one against the mid-ranger to begin with, but far from impossible. But as I say, that is a discussion for another video. Here, if the mid-ranger is going to breach the order, he'll do so most likely by either utilising a proxy on his behalf, by trying to get somebody to come along and say, on the narcissist's behalf, please will you just at least talk to him? He doesn't want to cause you any trouble. He just wants to explain why he's been behaving as he is. And of course, the mid-ranger, with his sense of entitlement and blinded to his behaviour, doesn't see that what he's doing is haranguing and unpleasant. He instead just thinks, look, we can talk this out. I'm not a bad person. We can sort this out. Please, can we resolve everything? If only you'd let me talk. Indeed, you may end up getting a restraining order against a mid-ranger because they just won't leave you alone after you've ended the relationship. Not because they're being violent towards you, not because they're making threats, but rather they just won't leave you the fuck alone. They keep calling by, can we just talk it out? Why have you done this to me? I can't live without you. Please, I'm going to kill myself if you don't come back. Come on, why can't we talk about these things? We should sort things out for the sake of the children. And you get harangued and guilt-tripped and pestered, that it wears you down and becomes a huge irritation. You're not so much frightened of the narcissist hurting you physically, but rather you're just sick to the back teeth of them continually pestering, haranguing, ringing, texting, emailing, turning up outside of the house, pestering you for another chance to make things right. Doling out the pity plays and the symphonies. So often the mid-range narcissist will try and get a spokesperson to speak on their behalf to build a bridge between you. Or, in some instances, they will actually breach it, thinking that what they're doing, because it's not aggressive, isn't actually a breach of the order. And in those circumstances, you've then got a breach, and you can apply to have them committed. That will invariably occur with your lower cognitive function mid-range narcissists. They make the stupid mistake of thinking, well, all I was trying to do was sort things out. Blinded by their sense of entitlement and lack of accountability, they engage in this way, try to contact you. So mid-rangers are more likely to obey the order once it's in place, and it acts as a significant depressant effect upon the likelihood of you being hoovered, i.e. being breached, because of mainly of the presence of the facade and potential impact upon fuel gathering capabilities. Where it is breached, it will be done in a way of getting somebody else to basically hoover by proxy to try and set up a pleasant meeting to end all of this silliness, or occasionally the narcissist does breach it on the basis of trying to sort things out, not believing that his passive-aggressive but unaggressive behaviour is just trying to resolve matters. When it comes to the greater or ultra narcissist, then ultimately the greater or ultra is well aware of the downside of contravening such an order and the impact that it will have on the facade. Furthermore, there will be the conscious awareness of the potential impact upon capabilities for gathering fuel and damaging the facade. However, the greater and the ultra is driven and regards the appearance of such an order as a challenge for him to flex his cunning and manipulative muscles. What will happen is the greater or ultra won't be able to resist the opportunity for playing games, but will do so in a manner which minimises risk to him. There will be the arrogance to assume that we will not be caught, but we lack the stupidity of the lower echelon narcissist to blindly contravene it. Instead, we will utilise all manner of alternative tactics to bring about a breach of the order, but we will do so through others with absolutely no proven or evidential link to us. We will rely on significant plausible deniability and the threat of breaching it to cause consternation on the part of the victim. And therefore breaches will be effected not in person, but through alternative methods to keep you on your toes. The greater and the ultra won't want to suffer the downside because we're wary of this. We recognise that we will be affected, namely our standing and repercussions from that with regard to the breach of a restraining order. And this is, of course, assuming you even managed to get one in the first place, which would be somewhat difficult with regard to a greater or ultra. We are aware of the effect that it will have on our carefully constructed facade, but the temptation to play games with you, to outsmart the order, of course, to assert control over you, ultimately proves too great. If there's a Hoover trigger and the Hoover execution criteria is met, then you can expect there to be a hoover from the greater or the ultra, but in a way that is clever, subtle, and obviates the order. There will not be a crass and blunt weapon involved. There will be a breach of it, but through clever manipulation, the use of others, and the complete avoidance of repercussions. Where you can, you ought to obtain a restraining order against the narcissist to protect yourself. As mentioned, it's often very difficult with regard to the greater or the ultra, but the good news is that it is very rare for you to be involved with them, and most of you will be involved with lesser or mid-range narcissists. They can act as a basis of provocation for lessers, but ultimately it gives you the weapon to have them removed and have them sent to prison, which makes your no-contact regime all the stronger. Mid-range narcissists, they are less likely to breach it, but may do so in the circumstances that I have explained, not necessarily in an aggressive manner, but more in an irritating, whingy, babyish way of, can we just sort all of this out and stop this nonsense? And of course, if they breach it, then you know what to do. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.